Yes.
So thank you all for being here, and I'll just have some brief remarks. I know all of you have questions, and I appreciate your patience. We've all been working very hard, but honestly, nobody has worked harder than Marvin Abney in the Finance Committee. He's done a tremendous job. He has been an unbelievable asset to me and to all the members of the Finance Committee, everyone else, myself, and the leader. And we've worked hard to put together what we think is a very good budget to present to the Finance Committee this evening for their consideration. The budget was crafted with the input of the Finance Committee, all members of that, as well as the Democrats and Republicans. We were trying to work collaboratively. We've worked with the Senate and the House and the Governor's office to put together what we think is a good budget. And I'm happy to answer his questions. Defer to the chairman and to obviously all of Sharon Reynolds, who's the superstar of the budget, not only here in Rhode Island, but throughout the country. You're nationally recognized. Yes, you are. And no, you can't have a raise. So, anyone, first question? Kathy, you're sitting in the front. You look like you have a question.
Oh God, where to start? Start with what I've been writing about, Eleanor Slater Hospital. Are you giving the governor the $64.9 million to build a new building on the Zambrano campus? And are you doing anything else in the budget to sort of help shape the future?
Not at this time. We all recognize Zambrano. Our Finance Committee has had numerous hearings. Our Oversight Committee has hearings on it. It's near and dear to our heart. But the governor hasn't presented a formal plan yet. I believe there will be one later this month. We are committed from the House side to address this issue and make a decision, but it has to be done in an open, transparent process. We have to know what the plan is and what's happening. So, but we stand ready to work with the governor and the Senate and anybody else who has ideas. We want to make sure that the patient care and the quality of care are the best they can be for those the most vulnerable of our citizens.
Are you giving them, just one more on this subject, are you giving them the extra money the governor asked for to plug the deficit?
Yes,
and the fact that they don't have Medicaid money?
Yes.
How much?
Approximately 45 million, 44. Sharon,
The restoration's about 40, yeah.
about $40 million. We are giving $40 million to plug the hole, so to speak.
Speaker, are there any broad-based tax increases in the budget? And if not, how do you answer progressives who say that we're living in a new Gilded Age and that more affluent people are not paying their fair share?
So there are no broad-based new taxes in the budget. And what I would say is what you do have in the budget is a taxation of the top 7% of the businesses in Rhode Island who received PPP. We have raised, as you all know, we had the press release out earlier today, we have raised the exemption from $150,000 to $250,000. And by doing that, we are taxing the people who made a profit on that money, or in essence, was able to use that money as a way to generate a profit for their business. If they didn't make a profit, they don't pay. But to me, that's a fair taxation. It's a one-time tax, by the way.
What about the argument from progressives that the super wealthy and the wealthy are the ones who've made out in the economy over the last 10, 20 years, that they would only be taxed on income over $475,000, and that amounts to what progressives call a more fair approach?
Well, what I would say about this, the so-called tax to rich you're talking, there are 4 reasons why. I will tell you that there was support for this proposal, but it was not overwhelming support in the House. I will also tell you that I have a cautious wait-and-see attitude to see what the federal government is doing. President Biden has had several stimulus plans where this proposal has been in those plans, out of those plans. It'd be much easier if it was a broad-based tax across all of America, all the United States, instead of just Rhode Island. I'm cognizant of the fact that we have to be competitive with our neighbors, and we have to go from one of the lowest taxes to one of the highest taxes. We don't have the same supercharged economy as Massachusetts. And if we raise our taxes too high, we will lose not only people but businesses. And the 4th argument I will say is, however well-intended the tax may be, there is some consequences. Many Rhode Island small businesses a tax with a subchapter S, which means that their income is not taxed at a corporate level. It passes down to the personal income. If you have a small business, you have a family business, we have 3, 4, 5 people in your family working, $400,000 of income for a family is not a lot when you own a small business. So this, in essence, would have been a tax to some, not all, but to some small businesses. So we were concerned about that coming out of the pandemic. We didn't want to hurt small businesses.
May I follow up? The PPP loan being raised from $100,000 to $250,000 for threshold, does that amount to a tax cut for people who earned over $100,000 from the government that way, for businesses?
It's about businesses, and it's what they borrowed, and it's about losses and how you apply the money going in and money coming out.
Right.
It was important, I think, that the people who, took huge loans, and God bless them, let's keep in mind that those PPP loans are exempt from federal taxation. We're only talking about a small tax. So I don't necessarily think it's a tax cut, because the way that program worked is that money had to go to employees. They had to use it to keep employees on and to help businesses that were hurt. So it was an opportunity for them, and I'm glad Rhode Island businesses used them. But some people profited, and those people who profit at that top end, 250 above, we're asking them to do their fair share and pay a small part of a state tax only to help citizens of Rhode Island.
When we broke the numbers on the number of pass-through businesses in Rhode Island that are actually affected by a tax-to-rich scheme, it was actually very, very small. It was less than 4%.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number,
Yeah.
but I will tell you that in my caucus of Democrats, there was not a widespread support for this, and I know this is the next question coming, or for the sugary tax. And there will not be the sugary tax in the budget, the sugar tax, as they call it, on beverages. There was just not enough support among my caucus, among the members of the House. And that was for both.
Can you give us the hard numbers? How big is the total budget? How big is the general revenue piece of the budget?
The total budget, I believe, is about $13.1 billion. Is that a fair statement, Sharon? She knows better than I do. But it's about $13.1 billion.
That went up a lot for me, like.
Yes, it did, because we took advantage of every federal dollar we could get to help our businesses, and we want to do that. We want to get that money out, and you'll see in the details of the budget before the Finance Committee that we spent generously on a lot of programs. As we all know, I've been very vocal about affordable housing. You will see a commitment for affordable housing in many different areas, including a program that my good friend, the leader, worked on with several representatives, Pay for Success, which is a 5-year pilot program to help homeless. You will see in this budget a dedicated revenue stream with a conveyance tax for properties over $800,000. And that, I'm sorry, Patrick.
That's higher than McKee had proposed and Governor Mundell beforehand. What was the thinking behind raising that question?
And we're trying to balance it. We're trying to balance what the governor wanted, what the House wanted, but it was not that prices are surging a lot of money right now. There's a lot of other, housing initiatives in the budget, including obviously the housing czar. We're going to try to emulate the process that Massachusetts has done successfully. We had to hold someone accountable. We have to have one person being able to have metrics of where we are, what we need to do, and where we are in terms of accomplishments and how we can improve.
Would the surging, skyrocketing prices not suggest that actually we could raise this surcharge and not have an impact on that upper stratospheric limit of the market?
No, well, as Steve said, I think it was Ian who said tax rich. When your homes are 800,000, that's not first-time home buyers, even in this market. The 800,000 might be in Massachusetts, but it's not in Rhode Island. So there are things in there that I think I would say are of a progressive tax nature, but we try to balance that, and I thought that 800,000, and the committee felt that 800,000 was the right number. Very similar to what the governor, but slightly higher. And you don't forget, you have the realtors. We're going to look at the possibility of doing a first-time home program and put some money in for tax credits and stuff. This is just an idea that came out of that. It's something we'll look at as we go forward later in the year, and hopefully when we are able to utilize some of that federal money.
Peter, speaking of taxes, the proposal for the subsidy for out-of-state publishers to publish the legal notices contained in the budget or no?
Absolutely not. That came in very late in the session as a standalone bill. It is still alive, but it is staying as a standalone bill.
Do we have an idea of how many affordable housing units might come online with the type of, the money we're putting into it?
No, it's way too early for that. But the whole idea is not necessarily to put money in, it's to create a long-term revenue stream to look at a long-term solution. We've tackled affordable housing here, right? We've done it through bond initiatives. We've done it through these one-time programs. We need to have a coordinated strategy going forward that will be hopefully in operation for a long time, long after I'm gone.
With a good chunk of the money that's being used coming from the federal dollars that are pretty much to be a one-time thing based on the pandemic, do you see that 13.1 billion as a level that will be at this year and then coming down lower in years to come, or is this a plateau we're going to move up from?
No, I think it will come down, but you know, who knows what stimulus package may come out of Washington. I've always said whenever I can use a federal dollar instead of a state dollar, I want to use a federal dollar. So,
Can you talk a little bit about education and the fight between the charter schools, the traditional schools, and how the budget may be trying to address that? And while confirming that there will be no voting on the proposed moratorium?
I can't say that because that came in as a standalone bill and it's still alive, and that may change in form or it may not. We just have to wait and see as we play out the last few weeks here. But I will tell you, there is no moratorium in the budget. And we're addressing it a couple ways. We have some pieces of legislation that will change the way the lottery for charter schools are being conducted right now. Instead of an opt-in, it will be an opt-out lottery. There'll be some minor exceptions. Representative Amore, to his credit, worked with a long-standing sponsor, Representative Jello, to come to that product will be voted on in the House soon. In addition to that, there's a current law, I believe, in place that's to do with density, which basically would give some money to the school districts that's lost students. It's possibly a one-time money, but it's a formula that has been established before in law, and we're looking to fund that to some degree.
Do you know, can you tell me what the percentage is? If you lose X percent of your population to a charter school, we, the state, give you extra money, transition money?
I think it's a per pupil basis at $500. That's what I thought. $500 per pupil. So the city of Providence, if they lose 100 students or 1,000 students, do the math, times 500.
Car tax, did you do the phase out, continue it for another year as planned?
The car tax is current law, and we are following current law. There'll be no changes. There will be the elimination of the car tax for this year. We will continue to fund our obligations under the current law. That's extremely popular, and that is popular across the spectrum of the progressive, moderate, and conservative members, both Democrat and Republican in the House. We want to get rid of the car tax, and we're funding the fourth year of that.
Could you clarify on the federal dollars? We had been under the impression that the newer stimulus money coming in was not going to be part of the budget.
That's correct.
That's correct. So if you could just outline where this big increase from the governor's budget, where the federal dollars are coming from.
So the state got a lot of federal money, and the other stimuluses. The stimulus that we're not spending is the one that we just received, but we've had a lot of our money. We've had a lot of other stimulus over the last year. We've had 3 different stimuluses, and there were a lot of money that was earmarked for specific causes and programs. And we wanted to get every one of those dollars out to help, whether it's child care, whether it's education. No one has asked about RIC, but the governor asked for an allocation for RIC. Not only did we keep it, but we increased it to $5.9 million above what the governor has asked for Rhode Island College.
Do you expect to have to make some painful cuts to these programs in out years if you have to come down from $13 billion?
No, I don't know what the out years are. It all depends on the economy and how it goes, but the money that is the one-time money. We're using that one-time money. We were very judicious on increasing money on yearly allocations. We did do that in some areas, like Rhode Island Works, which is a program designed for people that need clothing assistance. Hasn't had a raise in 30 years. So we gave them a raise, and we know that's a raise that we will continue to pay. And we gave them a significant raise of 30%.
So it was $554 a month, back to when the previous governor,
Yes.
if I remember.
About,
And
it was
what?
we raised it, there's a formula, it depends on how many children you have and how much, across the board, 30%, roughly.
Okay.
It's a significant raise, and we felt we wanted to do that because those people needed it.
Is that general revenue or is there a match to that?
I believe it's general revenue. Yeah. Yeah, there's a block grant, but anything above the block grant is general revenue money, state money.
So you're putting a general revenue allocation on
Yes.
top of the TANF
No.
grant?
Not right now?
Not yet.
Not yet. We may have to, we're prepared to do that, but not in this particular budget.
What is the general revenue, the grand total general revenue number? Have we got that before?
I will defer to Sharon on that.
$4,550,000,000.
For
4.5 billion, roughly. 4.5 billion.
Right, class? Governor wanted to shut off the state-run group home system and privatize it. Are you going along with this proposal?
I don't think so. No, it's not in the budget. No.
It's not okay.
For the,
Go ahead.
for the PPP loans, is that going to be for the 2020 tax season, so it'll be retroactive?
It depends on, I guess, when the loan was given. Some loans were given this year and some loans were given last year. And when the loan was actually forgiven, not given, but forgiven by the federal government.
Okay, so they'll have to go back and refile.
Some will, some won't. It's individual case. When you're a business and you get that kind of PPP, you have accountants and you know how to do that. One at a time. The gentleman, Lou.
Yeah, so that's both rounds of PPP we're talking about.
Yes.
The governor said that he expects to come out with his plan for Eleanor Slater by the end of this month. Do you expect to pick that back up later this year
Yes.
in terms of funding specifically?
No, we'll certainly start the evaluation process. There's a possibility that we could be back here in the fall, so we're going to look at that. When the governor releases his plans, we will begin our review.
Do you have anything in here that would deal with executive powers, states of emergency, et cetera? I know there was some discussion of that.
We have, I get some language that returns us back to, where we are in terms of the spending of the General Assembly. We're not in a pandemic anymore, we're in a recovery. So there will be some language that kind of just reinforces that, but it's nothing, it's not any kind of a power grab by the General Assembly. It's returning us back to where we are, which is that we are the allocating body of revenue, and we will maintain that. That is our constitutional obligation, and we will continue to fulfill that. And that's, my members feel very strongly about
So
that.
basically no more, the governor announces he's launched a program today with federal money without any vote or anything like that.
Yes, that's correct.
Are we getting either a state health lab or a state police fair?
Yes and no, which one do you want to know?
Start with the health lab.
First of all, let's just say this. Dr. Alexander Scott has done and continues to do a tremendous job. And she's doing so in a very difficult physical space. She deserves, she needs, the people around need a new health lab. We are committed to address that issue, but we're not committed until we have a public process of where the site selection would be, and we're not committed to spend any money until we know what that process is, what the plan is, what the final costs are, and where the lab's going. Most likely, from our general or first round of guidance, we can use most, if not all of that cost with federal money, which we won't get final guidance until October. So we are prepared to step in and do our part, but I am concerned, and a lot of people said the 195 land, I'm concerned that we go through a public site selection process, an RFP. I don't want to run it, the House doesn't want to run it. I don't care if it's Commerce or State Properties or DOA, but there has to be a public process regarding the site selection, and there has to be obviously public hearings and vetting on that.
So to allocate the ARP money, if you're making clear the legislature is going to go back to appropriating money, not the executive.
That is correct.
Does that mean we won't expect to see hard commitments of the state's ARP allocation until you roll out, or I guess until the governor proposes an FY23 budget?
Yes.
Maybe you've talked
Or
about
supplement,
looking at it.
yes.
Or it could be a supplement.
Yes, the answer to that question is yes, Ken. So, but I want everybody to know that won't be just done. It will be done after public hearings, vettings by the Finance Committee, especially the House Finance Committee. I think it's important that we have transparency and accountability. And I think it's, people need to know where their money's going, because it is taxpayer money, even though it's federal taxpayer money, how it's being spent, and where it's going. And they want to hear us, meaning us, the House Finance Committee, ask the tough questions and get the right answers.
How about the consent decree?
Yes, what about the consent decree?
Did you have to put in funding to meet the requirements of the consent? This is the Judge McConnell one, right?
This is an ongoing case of litigation. I believe there's an evidentiary hearing coming up next month. We have allocated money for this, but we're going to let the process play out with the Attorney General and Conflict Counsel and the Governor's Office are involved in litigation, so I don't want to go too deep into the details, but we're cognizant of it and we're monitoring the situation. We will do our part as a General Assembly in that. I think that's a fair statement.
You are allocating money for it, though, right?
I believe there's,
Same as the governor.
yeah, the governor proposed 10 million.
Yeah, but then he proposed another 30 or so.
Okay, so whatever the governor put in his budget, we're going to fund. It's like almost like a set aside. It's not allocated for specific purposes yet.
The rates.
Yeah, the provider rates. And then as far as that, we'll see where it goes from there.
How about DCYF? Again, there was talk of, I think the governor proposed to increase DCYF funding. What did you decide on DCYF?
We did everything the governor wanted and then some. Okay, and I know there was a lot of talk by many members of the General Assembly. The Republicans made this a priority, the House Finance Committee made this a priority, and the House Oversight Committee made this a priority. So we're going to do a couple of things with DCYF money. There's a lot of money available to DCYF with computer upgrades, stuff like that, but we're going to fund them an additional $10 million plus above what the governor asked for. We want to be able to give them the tools. We're also increasing the salary of the director to $200,000, so that give the governor flexibility. It's not automatic 200, it's up to, so we can go out and recruit whoever he believes is the best person, qualified person to take over this very troubled agency. We will continue with our oversight hearings, and we'll continue with our Finance Committee hearings to make sure that we monitor DCYF. It has been a legacy problem, and we, the General Assembly, are going to do our very part to address it. So we don't want to underfund them. They asked me, the department asked this above in our finance hearings and in oversight hearings, and we're going to commit to make that investment in DCYF. Those children are very vulnerable and deserve the best opportunity.
Do you think that the salary amount on the DCYF director's job has prevented the state from getting someone into that job? I don't think anyone's hired on an official capacity since director.
I don't know that particular is. The governor requested that, and in our weekly talks to address that salary issue, so I wanted to give him that opportunity to I didn't want us to lose a blue chip prospect because we didn't have enough money allocated, and I didn't want to have to go back to the General Assembly at a later point and change it. I wanted to give him the flexibility to recruit a top-notch candidate.
Can you talk about other pay raises that are built into the budget? It sounds, in addition to the director, different groups of people in the nursing homes, people in the DD community. I keep hearing anecdotally about a number of different groups who will get pay raises outside of immediate government as a result of the budget.
What do you mean by outside of immediate government?
Well, people work in nursing homes to work for state governments.
So
But the question would be, did you build in some money so that there would be...
there is money for the nursing homes in the budget, and the law we passed creates and the COLA is going to be fully funded, and that hasn't always been the case in the past. There is an increase in the base. In addition to that, we're providing $600,000 in CNA training. CNA training for state training for nursing, certified nursing assistants.
How much money are you putting in for the nursing homes, and how much of that is dedicated to raises for the workers?
I think that it's approximately 22 million.
I don't have enough to talk
Yeah,
about.
it's I remember this because I negotiated this bill. It's about $22 million, and there's a component of that. There's a part of that is a base, and part of that is an amount that has to be spent on wages. About 70% or 80%. I don't remember that exact number. of that component.
Peter, you had mentioned a possibility of a fall session. Can you talk us through your thought process on that? What can't be addressed now that you think needs to be addressed as a first session?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, this has been an incredibly productive year. We've worked very hard under very difficult circumstances in the middle of the pandemic, but let's not forget that last year, because of the pandemic, we had a very, very short session and we did not accomplish a great deal of these issues that were left over. Nursing homes left over, IGT Twin River were left over. So there were a lot of issues that required a lot of intense negotiation, hearings, detailed substitutions, working with stakeholders, and there are issues that everyone seems to want to talk about is marijuana, which is not in this budget, by the way, at all. And I've seen and I've heard several different proposals that are very divergent from the cultivators, from the dispensaries, from different stakeholders, from the Senate and from the governor's office. And then just recently, Representative Slater introduced a bill on marijuana. I want to be fair and review all of them, do that. I don't think I can get that done in this session. The priority of the House has always been and remains the budget. So about a month ago, the budget became an everyday, all weekend, all week project. So we worked very hard on it. And I thank you, Sharon, because I tortured her many a weekend.
Is there anything on historic tax credits?
Yes, we decided to jumpstart that program, which is about to run out approximately $20 million additional revenue in tax credits for historic tax credits.
And
And film credits, we're going to put a one-time allocation of an additional $10 million. We allocate, I believe, $20 million a year. This is a one-time allocation to go up to 30 for next year.
Is there like a movie you've been told you need to vote in for?
Well, it's funny you say that. There's no particular movie, but I hear there's a lot of a buzz around there. There's been some reports recently, as this afternoon, that Disney's looking here. I've also heard Netflix as well is interested in coming to Rhode Island.
And who plays you in the movie?
Josh Miller. That's an inside joke for my friends at the Journal.
Do you have any visibility into how this changes the outlook? I know sometimes it takes time to run those projections. Is it about the same as what looking the governor? Is it get worse, get better?
I think it's better. I honestly think it's better. I think we're trying to look at ways that we can, when we fund a program, that we can continue to fund it without creating structural deficits. You know, budget is not a science, it's an art. It's all based revenue and projections and the federal government, what happens. That's why I'm so careful about our tax structure. I just don't want to drive people out of Rhode Island and businesses. I mean, I talked to a business in northern Rhode Island. I mean, they were very, very concerned with the so-called tax the rich. And it was a big, large insurance company, and he's like 2 miles or 3 miles from the Massachusetts border. We made it very clear. He made it very clear to me that I've been very consistent with this. When I started talking about this issue became an issue in January, I did a lot of calls with chamber events and different advocacy groups and media events. And I always said the tax policy is driven by the revenue. It's very hard, it's very difficult to raise taxes when you have a lot of revenue. And then you also have $1 billion, waiting to be done. So those were all part of my consideration, and not just when I say mine, the House, all of us. We were cognizant that we want to have a competitive business environment for the business community.
Any increases to any fees?
There was a request for a beach down in Westerly, by the town of Westerly, and Mrs. Farmer?
State Beach.
State Beach. The town requested that because they were being overrun with people from Connecticut, I think, to be honest with you. So that was in the governor's budget, that stayed in the budget.
But no other business fees or licensing fees that have gone up this year?
No?
And none in Narragansett, is there another?
Port of Galilee.
No, Patrick, you can go to the beach without paying extra.
Can we go back to PPP just for a minute? If we had forgiven, not taxed all of it, I think we were told the number was $133 million in foregone revenue. What are the numbers now, and we can look at it either way? How much are we expecting the over 250 to pay, or how much are we keeping? Either way.
Yeah, I think it was 67 you were gonna keep.
Yeah, I think it's around 40 now, am I correct in that? And keep in mind, the original numbers were always estimates because we were continuing to get more information on PPP. This is why many people, and not so much the media here today, but a lot of people say, why do you wait till the end to do the budget? We wait till the end because we need revenue numbers, and we usually typically wait for the April 15th revenue numbers for our May estimating conference, but this year, because that was delayed until May 17th, it was a little bit later. I was hoping to be done to be close by now, but we had to wait for the revenue numbers. You always want to use the best available data, the most accurate numbers you have. And that's
What is the PP, the 40 million, I'm sorry?
Is
Which
what
side of the equation is
what
it?
we would anticipate recapturing the way we have structured in this budget.
Thank you.
Do you know how that's split between the 2 years?
It's very low from last year.
Yeah, it's
Most of it's,
the overwhelming majority of it is in this year.
This year?
Yes.
no,
The other way around? Next year? Okay, so it's very little this year and it's more next year? All right, my mistake, so I stand corrected by the expert.
Are you?
Go ahead, Ted.
Just another flat number question. What's the final revised number for FY, what we're in right now, FY '21?
That I will definitely defer to Sharon.
14
Wow.
billion, 307.
14 point what?
14,307.
307.
Are you, pardon me, I have to get the job. Are you creating any new programs? Are you creating any new judgeships? Are you creating any new mental health court, diversion courts? Anything new that's coming from the legislature that wasn't in the governor's budget?
I'll defer to my leader and talk about Pay for Success, which is a new program initiated by the House. But other than that, there are no new judges, there are no new magistrates, there are no new major programs. Pay for Success, Chris, you want to talk about it?
Sure. So it's a program that was been around for some time in the committee process, but what it does is essentially it recognizes that people who are chronically homeless use a lot of state resources, and so we put money into a program to try to come up with a way to provide wraparound services and housing services to 125 of the chronically homeless in Rhode Island to save state revenue for human resources, provide them a home, keep them out of our criminal justice system, to save money from the state. And the way that happens is you set up essentially a contract with a service provider that sets up these metrics, and if they meet these metrics, they get paid for the work that they're doing. If they meet those metrics, we'll save multiple times more than the amount that we're putting into the program, which is $6 million over 5 years.
This is a program championed by Rep. Kassar 2 years
Yes, it
ago.
was, and that's a good point. It came up as a budget amendment 2 years ago, and it hadn't been vetted, and there were no hearings. It was actually a very interesting program, and to her credit, she has worked hard on this, and I spoke to her today. She's overwhelmed and thrilled that it's going to be in the budget.
Didn't Armando propose something like that at one point, but it was a bond or something?
I will defer to you. I don't remember if it was.
Social impact bond.
Was it? Okay, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. This is not a bond.
Yeah.
It's not a
It's
bond.
called that.
A bond, not in the sense of a stock or bond in terms of your bonding together, I guess.
Is this a pilot program? Because 125 is pretty low compared
Yes.
to the actual.
Yes, we want to see how it works. We want to see, this could be something very good for the state. It could not be, but we're willing to make this commitment and give it a 5-year window to look at it and fund it for 5 years.
Right.
Is that $6 million a year or $6 million
Total.
over 5 years?
Total.
Anything on all the stupid debate over Kennedy Plaza and intermodals and the buses and all that?
There is nothing in the budget on that at all.
What are you doing for the bike path in Barry?
That's very interesting you said that. I know, I think it's either tomorrow or Monday, Director Alvini will be meeting with Representative Kazar, Representative Knight, and Representative Speakman, who represent that area, and to try to come to either a short-term and or a medium-term solution as to what that is. That's a dangerous situation there.
There's no $20 million in the budget for a new bike bridge, is that correct?
Only in your neighborhood. No, there's no $20 million in the budget for a bike path.
Warwick is getting asked me.
No, Warwick got treated like every other city. There was nothing special or different,
You want us to tell your constituents that?
It's the truth.
What would you point to in this budget that would be your top priorities?
I think housing in general, the housing issues that I have championed, the housing czar, the money, the revenue stream, the allocation of funds toward the housing production, the pay for success. We need to, this is a very serious problem, and it's not like a sexy problem. It's not like it's you build a new building and something nice happens and you can point to it as an accomplishment. This is a very real problem, and we need to address it. And it's popular among the members, and it's popular in the Senate too. I have to tell you that this was a priority of the Senate in our negotiations. And all my colleagues, not just the chairman and the leader, many of my colleagues from all districts, all parts of the state recognize that this is a problem. And we're doing a land use review committee. We've just launched a low and moderate income commission. We want to study different ways. We want to look at what other states are doing and what can we emulate that would be good for Rhode Island.
Do you have a
The
ballpark?
czar's office, I mean, is it just one position for the czar? Is it an office? And talk a little bit about that, the funding level for that.
So it's in the budget. It will be looking under Secretary of Commerce. We, the General Assembly, will not do the selection, but we have put some criteria of what we're looking for in terms of background and qualifications.
But again, it's one person. It's not-
One person, there'll be some assistance from Commerce. I've spoken to Commerce Secretary prior. He recognized that this is an economic development issue. People don't believe it or not, but if you can't find enough quality, affordable housing for your workforce, companies won't move here. So this is a serious problem, and it's not just people like just the homeless. It runs the whole gamut of the socioeconomic ladder. So this is a problem that needs to be addressed. I had a very interesting conversation with someone today, Chairman McNamara had a lunch that I went to, and he's in the building construction business. He said to me, finally, the price of lumber has dropped 30% today or this week, which I thought was very interesting because I'm hoping that will stop bringing the cost of new construction down.
But how much, I mean, you're very familiar with this from your work as a lawyer. How much is it just...
When I used to do work.
Well, yeah, you had time for it. But how much of it is just the cities and towns, and Rhode Island's are pretty dense. They don't want more construction, and as long as Rhode Island doesn't build houses, which we don't do much of, and other types of housing, it's kind of unsolvable with that.
It is, but we're looking at creating some kind of a formula with the infrastructure bank to help with extending water lines and sewer lines, doing a state match. We've done something like that in the last round of bonds that were approved in March, but that was from a commercial standpoint. So there's opportunities to look at this in a way that we can hopefully incentivize it or mitigate the cost of new houses. A lot of times people don't want new houses because they bring in young families, children in the school system. You have people who have large lot zoning requirements. So that's what the commission is going to see what we can do. There's an answer for that. There's an answer called cluster development, which is you have 10 acres of land, and there's supposed to be 1 acre per home. So you leave 5 acres open space, and you put the other 10 houses, the same equivalent, on half-acre lots. And so you have 5 acres of development and 5 acres of open space. We all have to work together. Cities and towns, you're right, Ted, they have to do their part. Everybody wants housing, but nobody wants it in their backyard. So hopefully we can look at this issue, we can incentivize it, and if that's not successful, then we can look at maybe some kind of an aid formula, restricting their aid, not necessarily taking away, but not giving them increases. If they're not doing their part, if there's a silent prejudice against affordable housing, then we will act on that, but I'm not ready to do that now, and certainly not at the beginning of this process. Let's see what we can do. We filed legislation for e-permitting. We filed legislation not to tax spec homes until they actually ready to be lived in. I mean, that legislation has passed. We made that permanent. So there's lots of incremental steps we can do. I wish there was one magic bullet that could solve the problem. It's a case-by-case, city and town issue. And then you have the environmental concerns. You have to balance that. You don't want to be building on wetlands. You don't want to be building, in historic districts, the houses that don't. So it's a balance. You have to look at this stuff. I think the Zoning Enabling Act, which the General Assembly passed in the early 90s, needs to be revisited. We haven't done that in 30 years. So it's time to look at that. What can we do to address these issues? They're long-standing issues. They're on the gauntlet of infrastructure, NIMBY, environmental constraints. There's a lot of things you can do with zoning, so you can also have in-laws, your family members live with you without the need to go into a zoning board or a planning board hearing. Let's try to keep families together, keeps them out of institutions, keeps them together. The family is happier, the state's happier, the medical system, home care is happier.
You know, in Rhode Island, only 35 people have been able to use the housing vouchers in the last 6 months out of 240 or so of applications. 89 people were granted these vouchers in Rhode Island, but there is no affordable housing that will take these vouchers.
Well, we passed the law, and
Right.
it's signed into law just this past March.
Oh, I know, but I mean, even with that, there's no housing for them. It's not a matter of being discriminated against necessarily. It's a matter that there is no place to redeem them.
So, you're right. I know it's a problem. We have to look at our housing authorities, and we have to make sure that they can use more capacity. Can they build more affordable housing? We have to look at that opportunity. Some of that comes from Washington, and we have to look at some of our cities and towns that have surplus real estate and see if we can incentivize it for them or get them to commit to building an empty school and making it into a mixed-use facility. I know in Warwick we have 4 empty schools that can be converted into housing, whether it's elderly housing, affordable housing, workforce housing.
I went to Lockwood, for instance,
Okay.
which is housing.
I live in Lockwood,
Yeah.
so
Larry, what's, just so we're on the same page, is it when the hearing starts we can publish our stories?
sure. Is that all right?
Or-
They've been patient.
Yes.
Before, when the hearing starts.
Yeah, when the hearing starts. Was that okay?
Yeah, that's what, I think that's what
Yep.
I was
As long as
You
you all
can start writing them now and then.
Oh, we've been writing the whole time, yes.
When the hearing starts.
Is there anything you forgot, Chairman or Leader? Or you should have mentioned?
Nope, you want to get down to the
Nothing,
hearing.
everything?
Want to get to the hearing.
It'll be a little.
We've made increases in childcare as well, the TANF program. That was, I believe Grace Diaz had a bill in that. She's a member of finance, she feels very passionate about that. Art Handy had one, so we've taken their bills and we've incorporated them into the budget. And you'll see increases in childcare and the Rhode Island Works.
Is that seats for childcare or pay increases for childcare workers?
No, rates paid to.
Rates that are paid will be increased.
To the centers.
We don't have any paper, so it's going to be hard to explain this, but McKee proposes $11.2 million budget, and now we're talking about 13 point something. How do we explain, that extra couple of $1 billion? What would be the big items that explain that?
I think it's federal funds that we received, and that we've decided to allocate those funds into the community.
But what would be the big items, spending items that account for that $2 billion?
Education. Unemployment. And don't forget, the cities and towns are getting their own allocations as well.
Yeah, is that in this budget? Is that flowing through?
That's ours.
Yeah,
The R20.
there's two parts of that money, Ted. There's one that we get, that we have to allocate out, and we will, and there's parts that they will get directly.
But doesn't most of it, other than the 6 cities, have to go to the state and then go to the
Yes.
state? So is all of that, well, the county money's not yet, is the first bucket of that in the
Yes,
budget?
about half.
But as Kathy points out, that still leaves a lot of increase there. I mean, is there a lot more UI than the governor had?
300 million.
300 million in that,
That's an addition over what the governor?
yes.
How thought you would be?
And how much additional for education?
Over 600.
600,
Oh, is that the schools
yes,
bucket from our,
Yes.
in this budget too?
yes. Is
Okay.
that correct? Yes, it is. I am correct.
And both fire and
Then don't forget, we had a stimulus in December, and we had one in March.
What is, a different way to look at it that might help us, what's the general revenue increase from the governor's proposed to this?
I went to
179 million.
Yeah, about 179, 180 million.
Okay, so the lion's share is these federal pass-throughs.
Absolutely. If that's it, I would say thank you.
As you all know, it takes a little more for production, it'll be a little bit, but we're working on it, but at least this
Maybe the
way.
printers weren't done because you weren't forcing us out.
Given that,
Yeah, you're also relaxed.
Yeah, you're also relaxed.
And I'm running out the
Printing
door.
out. See some long articles.
Are any of the sheets available to us that are going to be given to the committee?
I'm sorry, Kathy.
Are any of
Not yet.
the, Sharon,
Oh.
no,
I'll
somebody-
PDF them and make sure Larry gives them to you.
Okay, the yellow and the blue
Yep.
and the
They're still
green.
working on it.
Okay.
Larry, do you have an estimate on what time this will take place? Rough estimate?
Should be less than
Less than an hour.
Less than an hour.
Oh, what's, I
9:30ish?
a question for the speaker that my wife wanted me to ask, which is, what's your rule for late nights, and how do we interpret it in the final days of session?
It's the same as last year, which is around 9:30. If we're close to, resolution, I don't want to go past 10, so around 9:30. If the Finance Committee passes the budget, which I have every expectation they will, we'll start at 2 o'clock next Thursday. So to be 2 p.m. I'd like to try to wrap it up, but I will post for both days, Thursday and Friday.
How many budget articles?
14, 15, 15.
Well, that's not bad. We've
No.
seen worse.
Oh, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you for your patience.